She probably only got into college because of pity points, Deborah said, swirling her wine like she hadn't just insulted her own granddaughter in front of 50 people. I was standing less than 5 feet away. My name is Talia, and I've made a lot of painful decisions in my life. But coming to this graduation party, hosted by my ex-husband's family, might top the list. The party was held in the backyard of Eric's parents' house, the same one I used to mow barefoot when we were married and broke, and pretending we were happy. Now it had string lights, hired servers, and a jazz band playing under a rented canopy like we were attending some upscale fundraiser, not celebrating an 18-year-old's high school diploma. The only reason I showed up was Jasmine. My daughter, my heart, asked me to. "Just be there for me, Mom," she said. "Even if it's awkward, please." She didn't know what they said behind my back, what they've always said. I arrived late on purpose, wore a simple dress, flat shoes, no makeup. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to see Jasmine beam in her cap and gown. Instead, I was greeted by a cold glass of sangria and colder stares. Eric's new wife, Megan, nodded at me like I was an unwelcome neighbor. Deborah, his mother, didn't even fake a smile. "Look who made time to show up," she said to the woman beside her. "Must be a day off from collecting child support." People chuckled. I didn't answer. I've learned silence is sometimes the only thing that doesn't get twisted into ammunition. I just found a spot near the snack table and kept my eyes on Jasmine, who was chatting with her friends near the photo booth. She looked so grown up in her white dress and honor cords, so far from the little girl who used to crawl into bed with me after nightmares. And then, like clockwork, the whispers started. "I heard she got deferred twice. Didn't she write about her parents' divorce for her essay?" Her mom's been dragging that drama for years. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached, not because they were talking about Jasmine, but because they were using me to cut her down. Again. Eric didn't say a word. He was too busy playing the perfect host, shaking hands with neighbors, bragging about Jasmine's scholarship like he paid for it himself. He didn't. I did. By picking up night shifts at the bookstore and cutting groceries to the bone. I turned to leave. I had already made it halfway across the yard when I heard the glass clink. Deborah stood at the center of the patio, wine in one hand, Mike in the other. "To Jasmine," she said, "for doing so well, despite the circumstances she was raised in." There were gasps, a few laughs. I froze. Jasmine turned toward her grandmother, face blank, lips pressed tight. I could see her breathing change, her fists clench. Deborah kept going. "We weren't sure how she'd turn out, given all the chaos. But look at her now." She actually looked proud of herself. That was when Jasmine stepped forward. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look to me or Eric. She walked straight up to the DJ booth and motioned for the mic. He handed it over, confused. She looked at the crowd, her classmates, teachers, family, people who'd smiled at her while mocking her mother behind closed doors. And she said, "Actually, there's something you should all know." And just like that, the air snapped. Eric stood up from his chair so fast it tipped. Deborah's smile faltered. My hands went cold. I didn't know what Jasmine was about to say, but I knew it was going to change everything. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel alone. The second Jasmine said those words, the yard went still. Forks froze mid-air. Drinks stopped halfway to lips. Even the jazz band quieted, one horn letting out a confused squeak before cutting off completely. And there she was, my daughter, standing under the string lights like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. I didn't breathe. She adjusted the mic with both hands, her voice calm but steady. "You all came here to celebrate me. But most of you don't even know who I am. You only know one version, his version." She nodded once in Eric's direction. He tensed, tried to laugh it off. "Honey, come on now. It's just a party." But she kept going. My dad used to say my mom was dramatic, that she made things harder than they had to be. But I saw her cry in the car because she couldn't afford both gas and my school books. I saw her skip dinner so I could eat. She worked 2 jobs and still came home and helped me study. That's not drama. That's devotion. You could hear the wind rustling through the paper decorations. Even the ice in the punch bowl seemed to hold its breath. I felt the sting behind my eyes, but I blinked it away. I couldn't cry now. Not when my daughter was up there, rewriting the narrative they'd used to humiliate us for years. Jasmine's voice tightened. When I got accepted into NYU, some of you said it must have been pity, that admissions felt sorry for the poor little girl with the single mom. Well, guess what? I earned it. My GPA, my extracurriculars, my internships. No one gave me anything, least of all my dad. Eric stood up now. That's enough, he snapped, louder than he meant to. His face flushed red, his voice tight. This isn't the time. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She looked him dead in the eye and said, You didn't come to my robotics championship. You forgot my band recital. You were too busy every time I needed you. But somehow, you made it to every one of your wife's baby showers. You had time for that. A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. Megan looked like she wanted to crawl under a table. Deborah stood frozen, one hand clenching her wineglass so tight I thought it might shatter. Then Jasmine turned to her. And Grandma? You told me Mom ruined this family. But the truth is, she was never welcome in it. You looked her in the eye and said she wasn't good enough for your son. Well, guess what? Your son wasn't good enough for her. That's when the whispers started. Only this time, they weren't about me. They were about them. The cracks in their polished little world were finally showing. Deborah opened her mouth, but Jasmine cut her off. No, I'm not done. She took a deep breath. Some of you might think I'm ungrateful, that this is disrespectful. But silence isn't respect. And pretending everything's fine while my mom gets humiliated, again and again, isn't love. It's cowardice. Eric tried to grab the mic. Jasmine stepped back. Don't! You always told me to respect adults. But maybe if the adults had respected my mom, I wouldn't be up here saying any of this. The yard was dead silent. No music, no chatter. Just the sound of a teenager reclaiming her voice. And then, she dropped the mic. It hit the ground with a thud that echoed louder than any applause. Jasmine turned, walked straight toward me, and said, Can we go now? I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. We walked past the stunned faces. The fake smiles turned slack. The people who once whispered about how broken I was. Not a single one of them tried to stop us. Just before we reached the driveway, Deborah's voice broke through. Soft, almost shaking. She's not the girl we thought she was. I turned back once. Looked her in the eye. Number she's better. When we got to the car, Jasmine's hand was still trembling in mine. Not from fear. From everything she'd been holding in for years. Finally released. I opened the door. She got in without a word, buckled her seatbelt, then stared out the window like she was watching a movie of someone else's life. I sat in the driver's seat and let the engine run without shifting out of park. Neither of us spoke, not at first. My mind was still spinning from what had just happened. The speech, the silence, the stunned faces. Eric's jaw clenching so hard, I thought his teeth would crack. Deborah blinking like someone had poured cold water over her perfect suburban facade. But what I kept coming back to was this. Jasmine had stood up for me, in front of everyone, without being asked, and not just for me, but for herself. I'm sorry, I whispered. Jasmine turned, surprised. What? Why? Because you never should have had to be the one to say it. She shook her head. No, Mom, I had to. You protected me for so long. It was time I protected you back. I didn't even try to stop the tears then. We drove in silence after that. Just the sound of the road and the occasional sniffle. But by the time we got home, reality had started to creep back in. I knew what came next. The backlash. The phone calls. The guilt tripping. The gaslighting. And I was right. It started that night. Eric texted me 3 paragraphs, accusing me of poisoning our daughter against him. He said Jasmine had embarrassed the family, that I had let it happen, and that he was considering legal action if this continues. I almost laughed. He'd spent a decade rewriting the story of our divorce, painting himself as the victim, framing me as bitter, unstable, emotional. Now the truth was out, and he couldn't unhear it. But that wasn't even the twist. No, that came the next morning. I woke up to find 12 missed calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years. 3 of them were from Eric's oldest sister, Claire, who had always kept her distance from me during the marriage. I called her back. Her voice was shaky. "Talia, I saw the video." My stomach dropped. "What video?" She hesitated. "Someone filmed Jasmine's speech. It's on Facebook, and TikTok, and Instagram." My pulse spiked. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my laptop, opened my browser. And there it was. A video titled, "Teen Girl Calls Out, Family for Shaming, Single Mom at Her Graduation Party." Posted 6 hours ago. Over 480,000 views. I clicked play. There she was, Jasmine, under those string lights, voice clear and fierce. Every word she said, every cut to Eric's face, every gasp, every stunned silence, captured, unfiltered, real. The comments were flooding in. "I don't even know them, but I'm crying. That girl just said what thousands of us have felt. Single moms are heroes. Period. Someone get this girl a TED Talk." And then, buried in the comment section, one username caught my eye. At Deborah M_1964. She had replied to someone calling Jasmine disrespectful with a single sentence. "Sometimes it takes the youngest to teach us what respect really means." I stared at the screen, stunned. Deborah. The woman who once told me I was lucky her son married me. The same woman who called me a burden, a disappointment, a mistake. Now quoting my daughter, publicly. That was the twist I didn't see coming. Not the views, not the comments, not even the viral spotlight. But Deborah breaking her silence. Not with more venom, but with reflection, with regret. It didn't erase what she'd done. It didn't make her a saint. But it proved one thing. They heard us. And once the truth is out, no one gets to pretend anymore. The moment that video hit 1 million views, everything changed. Not just online, though the internet did explode. People were stitching Jasmine's speech on TikTok, reposting it on Facebook with captions like, "This girl is the future," or "Someone give this mom a crown." But the real shift? It happened offline, in the places where they used to whisper behind my back. Deborah didn't call, but she sent flowers, roses, white, with a card that read, "She's brave." I see that now. No apology, no admission, just enough silence to know something had cracked. Eric, on the other hand, was furious. He emailed the school board, trying to get Jasmine's speech addressed as a disciplinary matter. He claimed defamation, emotional distress, and even tried to bring up custody again, saying I had encouraged public shaming. But for once I wasn't scared, because this time I had receipts. I printed out the emails he sent me over the years, the ones where he refused to attend her events, claimed he was too busy for parent-teacher meetings, where he blamed me for Jasmine's anxiety, but never once asked if she had food in the fridge. I made copies, 3 sets. When I dropped Jasmine off at school one morning, I stopped by the administration office. I handed them the folder. "I don't want trouble," I said. "I just want you to know she told the truth." The principal flipped through the papers, his expression slowly shifting from professional neutrality to quiet horror. He nodded. "Thank you for bringing this in." That same day, Eric's custody concern was dismissed. In fact, the school invited Jasmine to speak at an upcoming women's leadership event. I could almost hear Eric's blood boiling from across the city. He tried again, texted me saying, "You're ruining my reputation." I replied with 2 words, "You did." But I wasn't done. Not yet. There was one thing I'd been keeping, something I hadn't shared, not even with Jasmine. 2 years ago, during our final custody mediation, Eric left behind a USB drive. He thought it was empty. It wasn't. It had recordings, voice memos. One of them was of him talking to his lawyer, mocking my mental health history, calling Jasmine a pawn, and saying, "Let her raise the kid. I'll win her back later once she breaks." I kept that file. For 2 years. Now? I forwarded it. To Deborah, to Claire, to the lawyer he used to brag about. No caption, no warning. I just hit send. 3 hours later, my phone rang. Private number. It was Deborah. Her voice wasn't smug anymore. It was hollow. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know he said those things." I didn't say anything. Then she said something I never thought I'd hear. I'm sorry, Talia, for all of it." I let the silence sit for a second. Then I replied, "I'm not the one you need to apologize to." She exhaled shakily. "I already called Jasmine." That's when I knew. This wasn't just cracks. This was collapse. The empire of lies Eric had built for years. The perfect dad image. The crazy ex-wife narrative. The fake smiles and weaponized charm. It all fell apart with his own voice. And the twist? The voice memo went viral. Claire sent it to a parenting blogger. The blogger posted it with the title, "When Narcissists Speak Freely, The Truth Behind Custody Battles." It hit 500,000 plays in 2 days. Eric's company issued a statement. They were reviewing internal concerns regarding employee conduct. That smug, untouchable man who once told me no one would ever believe me? He was now fighting to keep his job, fighting to keep his version of the truth alive. But it was too late, because Jasmine had already shattered the silence, and I had just buried the lie. 2 weeks after the audio leaked, Eric's carefully crafted world was in free fall. His LinkedIn profile quietly vanished. His company replaced his name on their website, and according to a very chatty mutual acquaintance, the board asked him to take an indefinite leave. He tried to spin it, of course, told people it was stress-related, that the clip was edited out of context. But the internet never forgets, especially when the voice in the recording is yours, and the words are venom in your own tone. Deborah stayed quiet after that. No more flowers, no more messages. But Jasmine told me she'd texted her again, just once. "Whatever happens next," she wrote, "know that I'm proud of who you are. Not because of your last name, but in spite of it." I don't know if that was meant to be redemption or resignation, but it felt like a line in the sand, a quiet way of saying, we see it now, and we can't unsee it. Jasmine's story made the local news, then the national news. People started calling her the girl who broke the silence. Colleges reached out. Nonprofits asked her to speak at youth events. A mother in Texas messaged me on Instagram. "Thank you. You gave me the courage to leave." But here's what hit the deepest. It wasn't the views or the applause. It was the night I came home from work and found Jasmine in the kitchen, stirring pasta, humming a song I used to sing to her when she was little. She looked up, smiled, and said, "I finally feel light, Mom." I stood there, watching her, not as a girl who stood on a stage, but as a young woman who carried the truth through fire and came out glowing. That night, I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and did something I never thought I'd do. I wrote my own story. Not a comment, not a thread, a full post. I told the truth about the marriage, about the lies, about the years I spent apologizing for things I never did and shrinking myself to keep the peace. And I ended it with this. They told me I was too emotional, too much. But it turns out I was just enough to raise a girl who knew how to speak when it mattered. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is raising someone who tells the truth you were once punished for. That post went viral too, but more importantly, it went quietly viral, shared between mothers, daughters, survivors, in direct messages, in texts, in comments that simply said, "I needed this." And that, more than anything, was justice. Not the public fall of a man who weaponized silence, but the quiet rise of the women he underestimated. These days, Jasmine and I are closer than ever. We don't talk about Eric much, not because we're scared, but because we don't have to. He's not the center of our story anymore. We are. And the weight I carried for years, the shame that was never mine, it's gone. Because when your child sees you clearly, when they speak for you not out of obligation, but out of truth, you finally realize you were never broken. You were just unheard, not anymore. If that ending hit you hard too, drop a 2 in the comments. And stick around if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and rooted in truth. Thanks for being here.